Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Blake with BS Coding, and today we're going to build a simple web application using the OMDB API to display specific movie information on our web page. This project will be using vanilla JavaScript, or in other words, using no frameworks. So let's get started. In order to get started with this project, you'll need to get an API key from omdbapi.com. The link will be in the description below. Once you visit the site, if you click on API key, you can choose the free option and put in your email, your first name, last name, and for the use, you can put n/a or learning APIs or whatever. And then just submit, and they'll send you the API key to your email that you listed here. So at the moment, I have a very empty, actually it's completely empty, folder here opened in my editor called Simple Movie App. And inside of here, I'm going to create an index.html. And I'm also going to create an index.js. So my HTML file is where my HTML will go, and my JavaScript file is where all my JavaScript will go. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put an exclamation point here and hit enter. This gives me my boilerplate information, my boilerplate code, and as you can tell, it has just the basic necessities. Has our doc type, an HTML tag, a head tag with some meta information in, as well as a title, and then we have a body here. So for the title, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put, we'll just do simple movie app. And now we need to actually link our JavaScript file to our HTML file. And we can use a script tag for that. Script. And inside of here, we can have a source attribute. And that's just going to be the index.js. I'm going to save that. And I'm going to go to my index.js file. And I'm going to do a simple alert that just says connected. And now if I open this file inside of my browser here, we now get this alert that says connected. So we have successfully connected our index.js to our index.html. So this web application is just going to be really simple. It's just going to be a form, and when we submit the form, this form is going to have an input, and whatever movie we type into the input, when we submit the form, it's going to grab information about that movie from the OMDB API. So I'm going to create a form here inside of my index.html. So it's just going to be a form tag. Now the form has an action. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to put the action as an hash symbol. And then we're going to have the method equal to get. Now we don't have to have a method here equal to get, because by default, a form when submitted will use the get method. So I'm actually going to delete that. I just wanted to show you that we can use a method attribute, but in this instance, like I said, default, a form when it's submitted is using the get method by default. So we're going to have an input here, type text, and I'm going to give it an ID equal to, we'll say movie search. Then we're going to have a button here with a type equal to submit. And this is just going to say get details. And if we reload, we still get that connected because we have the connected inside of our JavaScript file. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that. And let's just refresh, make sure that's gone. I'm going to zoom in here so we can see everything clearly. So let's go ahead and just try to get this form to be functional. So when we submit, so if I type in like Shrek and hit get details, it should bring back the information about Shrek. So let's just get that functional before we can actually display the information on our web page. So I'm going to go back, and I'm just going to refresh, make sure that's nice and working with a fresh document here. So inside of my index.js, I need to first select the elements that I want to manipulate. In this case, I want to manipulate this form because I want something to happen when we submit the form. So I'm going to create a variable called form, and I'm going to equal it to document.querySelector, and we're going to select the form tag. And we're going to listen for a submit event on that form. So form.addEventListener. Whoops. And we're listening for the submit event. And this takes a callback function. Now, by default, when we submit this form, it is going to reload the page, or it's going to go wherever we have the action sent to. So in this case, we don't want the form to reload because we're working with an API. So I'm going to pass the event object into our callback function here. And we can use a method on that event object called preventDefault. So if I call that event.preventDefault, what this will do is it will prevent the form from actually submitting or going to our action. This is important because we don't want our page to reload every single time that we submit. So another thing that we need to manipulate on this project is the actual input, because we need to grab whatever value is inside of that input. So in our case, I'm going to create a variable. I'm just going to call it, we'll say input. We'll equal that to document.querySelector. And we're selecting the element from our HTML that has the ID of, we'll do, I think we call it movie search. And just to see if this is working correctly, we will just console.log input here. So now whenever we submit this form, if we go to our console, which I'll zoom in here, if I type in Shrek, well, actually, it's not even going to pull out Shrek because we're not grabbing the value. So if I do input.value, now what will happen is when we log input.value, it's going to grab the value that is inside of our input. So in this case, Shrek. So if I refresh this again, Shrek, if I go to get details or click get details, we now get Shrek inside of our console. So now we know that our form is now working how we want it to work so far. So since we're working with an API that has an API key, we need to go ahead and grab our API key. And I'm going to save mine to a variable. I'm just going to call it API key. Now this is a string. So remember, if you signed up for the OMDB API, the API key was sent to you in your email. And I'm going to paste the API key in there. And it's okay if I'm showing my API key because I'm going to disable it after this video. Now, since we're working with APIs, we're going to be working with promises. And we're going to, excuse me, we're going to use async await while working with our promises here. So I'm going to create this, or I'm going to turn this function into an asynchronous function by using the async keyword here. And I'm going to wrap my code inside of a try catch block. So try catch. And I'm going to console.log error.message in my catch block, and in my try block, give me one sec. And in my try block, I'm going to start my API call. Now, we're going to be using the built-in JavaScript fetch function to make our API calls. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to do a const, and I'm going to say, I'm just going to call this variable response. And I'm going to equal that to await fetch. And if we go to our OMDB API, we can see what URL we need to make our API request to. So this says send all data requests to this API or this URL. So I'm going to grab this URL. I'm just going to paste that into here. Now I'm going to use backticks instead of single quotes or double quotes because we're going to be utilizing template literals. So here we have, you can see that we have an API key query string here, which this needs to equal your API key. In this case, I have my API key saved to a variable, so I'm going to place my variable inside there using template literals. So now that we grabbed or now that we know how to grab the value of our input, let's go ahead and let's grab that value and save it to a variable. So I'm going to say const movie is going to be equal to input.value. And in here, you can see that on the OMDB API documentation that we have an optional parameter that we can pass through, which is T, which is the movie title you want to search for. So I'm going to pass in a query string called T. I'm going to equal it to movie because that is the value of our input. So in our case, when we type in Shrek onto the form input, when we click get details, it's going to make an API call to OMDB and it's going to pass in Shrek for the T parameter here. Zoom out a little bit just so you can see everything. And then I want to, now what this will do is this will return JSON data. And in order for us to work with JSON data, we need to parse it into a JavaScript object. And to parse it into a JavaScript object, we could use the JSON method. So I'm going to create another variable. I'm going to const, we'll call it data. And we're going to equal that to, we'll say data, and we'll equal that to await res.json. And then we can console.log data. So if I refresh our project here, and I type in Shrek here again, get details, you can see that we now have a bunch of information about Shrek show up in our console, including the actors, the awards that it won, director, genre, plot, poster, ratings, title. So there's a lot of information that we can pull from this API. And we could use this API and display it onto our web page. So let's see what information that we would like to pull out from our API here. One information I want to pull out is obviously the title. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm just going to create, I'm going to put a div around, I'm going to put a div around my form here. And I don't have format on save, so I'm just going to go ahead and put that on real quick. format on save. There we go. So now it's going to format for us. And now I'm going to put another div here, and I'm just going to have an h1 that just says, this is going to be the title. So I'm going to give this an ID equal to movie title. So now let's select that movie title inside of our JavaScript because we want to manipulate that. So const will say movie title equals document dot query selector, and we're going to select the ID of movie title. Now that I saved here, it reformatted my my code here because I'm using the prettier extension. That's why it looks a little different. And we want to pull out title from this API so that we can get Shrek. So we can use object notation. What I want to do is I want to use the text content method or property, I should say, on our movie title. So I want to set the movie title dot text content. I'm going to equal that to data, because data is the object that's returned to us, dot title. So now if I refresh, we don't have our h1 there yet. Well, technically it is there, it's just empty. Shrek, get details, now we get Shrek to appear. So what other information can we pull out? We can pull out the poster. So I'm going to create an image here. Let's do another div, and we'll do image. And we'll just keep it blank at the moment. But I'm going to give it an ID of, well, I'll give it an alt first. We'll say movie poster. And then for the ID, we'll say movie poster. Go to our index.js. Let's select that movie poster. Movie poster equals documents query selector. And that's the movie poster. Now, to set the source attribute of our image tag, we could use the set attribute method. So in this case, we want the movie poster dot set attribute, and the first argument to the set attribute is the attribute that you want to set. In our case, we want to set the source attribute, and the second argument is what do we want to set it to. So we want to set it to data.poster. So we're going to say data.poster. So now if I refresh, we get an empty image here. If I type in Shrek, we now get Shrek to appear on our webpage, or at least the movie poster. Now, one thing I don't like is I don't like this blank image here showing up. So I'm going to give this image a style attribute, and we're going to say display none. So now it's no longer displayed on our web page by default. And inside of our HTML here, or our index.js, I can set it to appear right after we set the attribute here. So what I'm going to do is we're going to do movie poster dot style dot, whoops, I don't know why I did that, style dot display, and we're going to equal that to block or inline. So now it's not there. Shrek, get details, and now we get Shrek here. The reason why I used inline is because an image tag by default is an inline element. So now it appears. So now we fix that. Next, let's try and pull out the plot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another div here. And inside of here, I'm going to create like an H3, we'll say. And we'll do, we'll say summary. And then we're going to have a paragraph tag. And we'll just leave this blank, or the value blank, but we'll put an ID equal that to movie plot. Go to our index.js. Let's select that. So const movie plot is equal to document.query selector, and that's movie plot. And then down here, we can set it by using the text content like we did with the movie title. Movie plot dot text content. And we're going to equal that to data dot plot. So now if we refresh, it's empty. Shrek, get details, we now get it here. Now one thing I don't like is obviously the summary. The summary when we refresh this is here by default. I don't like that. So again, we'll do the same thing where we have the style equal to display none. And then our index.js, right after we set the text content, we'll go ahead and, well, actually before we do that, we'll do, whoops. Well, actually, we need to select that element first, right? We didn't actually select that summary title. So const, we'll say summary title is going to be equal to document.query selector. Oops. And we'll give this summary title. Whoops. And then index.html, we're going to give this an ID equal to summary title. And then here we can do summary title dot style dot display equal that to block. Now this style property, it allows us to add CSS styles to our elements. So I use block because by default an H3 element is block, as a block level element. So that's why I set it to block. Again, inline for the image because image elements are inline by default. So now if I refresh, it's no longer there. Shrek, get details, boom. Now we have the summary and we have the plot pulled out from the API. What else can we pull out? We can pull out ratings. In this case, we have 3 different ratings, and it seems like it's a nested array. So we have an object that has an array of objects. So the best way to do this is probably by looping through that array. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to create another div over here. Whoops. Div. And we'll do an H3 again. This one's going to say ratings. And we're going to give this the ID equal to movie ratings. Style equals display none by default because we don't want that ratings to be there at the start. And we're going to create I guess we can create a UL that's empty. And we'll just give this an ID equal to movie. So we call that movie ratings. We should call it ratings title. ratings title is better. And then here we can say movie ratings for our list. If I go to index.js, we can do const movie ratings is going to be equal to documents dot query selector, and that's movie ratings, the element with the ID of movie ratings. But we also have the ratings title, which is document.query selector, and that is the ratings title. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some comments here just to kind of separate our code a little bit so it's not so jumbled up. The first comment I'm going to put in here is for the summary. I'm just going to say summary. And then we have the movie poster here. So let's just do that. Movie poster. Oops. And then we have the title here. Movie title. Whoops, did that backwards. Just to make it a little cleaner. So next we have the ratings, right? So let me scroll down a little bit. So we're going to have another comment here. We'll say ratings. And here, oops, there we go. Here we need to actually pull out those ratings, and then we can loop over them. Now, to pull out the ratings, I'm going to save that array to a variable. So we'll say const, we'll say ratings. It's going to be equal to data.ratings. And then we're going to loop over. We're going to loop over the ratings and pull out the source and the value for each of those ratings. So now we can use a for each loop. So we have the name of our array. That's the array that we want to loop over, which is the ratings array. Dot for each. And we have our placeholder variable. I'm just going to call it rating. And we're going to use an arrow function here. And now what do we want to do for each rating that we loop over? We want to append it to our list. So we're going to do movie ratings. And we're going to say plus equals, whoops, dot text content. That's what I meant to do. Text content plus equals. And we're going to use a template literal. And we're going to append an li tag. And inside of there, we want to have the source and the value. So in this case, it's going to be rating dot source. And then we'll have a colon outside there. And then have another template literal so that we can concatenate our other value, which is rating dot value. But in order for this to work, we need to make sure that we have our ratings title appear. So I'm going to do rating title dot style dot display, equal that to block Shrek get details, and it actually appended the li as well because we use text content. If we use inner HTML, we can actually use these li tags. So at the moment, the reason why it's showing these li tags is because we use text content. So it's going to always apply everything that we have inside of the quotes or the backticks here. And we have those li's inside the backticks, so it's going to just put them in as if there was just normal text. But if we use inner HTML, it's actually going to format this information based on these tags that we have inside of there. So now if we refresh and we type in Shrek, get details, we now have regular LIs. Now I do believe that we're going to have an issue here, because if I type in, let's say, It, the movie It, and go down, we still have the ratings from Shrek here. So what we need to do is we need to clear out these ratings from Shrek, or from the previous search, and replace them with the new information. And the easiest way to do this is by having movie ratings and setting the text content to blank at the very beginning of our function here. So as soon as we submit this form, the first thing I want to do, and I'll do it up here right after the prevent default, is we're going to set the movie ratings dot text content. We're going to equal that to a blank string. So now every time that we submit our form, it's going to set that movie ratings to nothing. And then it's going to come down here and it's going to append our list items to that empty string here. So this should fix our issue. If we do Shrek, get details, we have our ratings still here. But now if I do It, get details, we now still have just 3 ratings here, and it got rid of our previous ratings. Perfect. So there is some refactoring that we can do. I am noticing that we're using a lot of we're using this data object here a lot. So we have it right here, there, and there. So since I'm using it in multiple places, I'm going to use object destructuring and just make it a little easier for us to work with, just so we're not repeating code so much. So I'm going to create an destructure our object like this by using const curly braces, and we're going to have title, poster, and then we have plots and ratings, and we're going to equal that to data. And instead of having data.title, we're just going to have title, and then we're just going to have poster, and we're going to have just plot and just ratings. And just to make sure it still works, if I type in Shrek, get details, we get information for Shrek. And if I do It, we get information for It still. So it's working perfectly fine. So this is our simple movie web application where we're just pulling information from an outside source, in this case OMDB API, and we're using that information that's returned back to us and displaying it on our web page. Now, we didn't do any styling whatsoever other than setting the display to none, but you can use something like Bootstrap or Materialize or any other type of framework, CSS framework, to make it so that this looks really, really nice. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and until next time.